taking flight. Buzzing hums in the meadow's breeze, a symphony among the trees. Little wings of wonder in the air, dancing freely without a care. From the skies to the forest floor, nature's beauty forevermore.
Little Wings of Wonder, Episode 10, Your Year-Round Hummingbird Guide. Living the Hummingbird Calendar. Brought to you by the 1940s romance murder mystery novel Underlying Love, a Worthington, Ohio mystery, and by the Little Wings of Wonder book series. Understanding the annual rhythms of hummingbird life transforms casual observation into informed participation in one of nature's most remarkable cycles. Each month brings distinct activities, challenges, and opportunities for those who wish to support these extraordinary birds while enjoying intimate glimpses into their fascinating lives. The hummingbird year unfolds according to ancient patterns refined over millions of years. Yet these patterns now play out against the backdrop of modern landscapes where human actions can significantly influence success or failure. The beauty of following the hummingbird calendar lies in its predictability combined with endless variation. While the broad patterns of migration timing, breeding activities, and seasonal behaviors remain consistent from year to year, individual variations, weather influences, and local conditions create unique situations that reward careful observation and responsive management. Those who learn to anticipate and respond to these rhythms discover that each season offers distinct pleasures and responsibilities in the ongoing partnership between humans and hummingbirds. Regional variations in hummingbird timing reflect the diverse climates and ecosystems across North America, from the subtropical conditions of southern Texas to the brief summers of Alaska's tundra edge. Understanding these variations helps gardeners and bird enthusiasts optimize their efforts to support local populations while avoiding well-intentioned actions that might actually harm the birds they seek to help. The integration of natural cycles with human activities requires careful timing of feeder maintenance, garden management, and habitat enhancement efforts to provide maximum benefit when birds need it most. This calendar approach helps ensure that support efforts complement rather than conflict with natural behaviors, while building the kind of year-round awareness that deepens appreciation for these remarkable creatures. January. The quiet season. What to expect? January represents the quiet season across most of North America, when the majority of hummingbird populations rest in tropical wintering grounds far to the south. However, this apparent dormancy masks intense preparation activities as birds begin the physiological and behavioral changes that will support spring migration in just a few weeks. In their wintering areas, hummingbirds are establishing feeding territories, building energy reserves, and beginning the complex hormonal changes that will drive their northward journey. In the southern United States, particularly along the Gulf Coast, and in the Southwest, January may still host lingering migrants or early arrivals of permanent resident species. These birds face unique challenges as they cope with the year's coldest temperatures while maintaining the high metabolic rates that their specialized lifestyle demands. Winter residents must locate reliable food sources that can sustain them through periods when freezing temperatures limit flower availability and reduce insect activity. the absence of hummingbirds from most regions during January provides opportunities for habitat planning and preparation that will benefit returning birds in the months ahead. This period allows gardeners to assess the previous year's successes and failures while planning improvements that will create better conditions for the coming season. Weather patterns during January often set the stage for spring migration timing, with unusual warmth potentially triggering early movement, while severe cold may delay departure from wintering areas. Understanding these connections helps predict when to expect first arrivals while preparing for potential early or late seasons that may require adjusted management strategies. Regional activities and preparations. Gulf Coast regions maintain heated feeders for any remaining winter residents while monitoring for unusually early arrivals that may occur during warm spells. Clean and prepare additional feeders for spring deployment, while checking heating systems that prevent nectar from freezing during cold snaps. Southwestern deserts. Continue supporting year-round resident populations through feeder maintenance and winter blooming plant care. Anna's hummingbirds and other permanent residents remain active throughout winter and require consistent food sources to survive cold periods. Pacific Coast. Prepare for potential early arrivals of migratory species while maintaining support for resident Anna's hummingbirds that may begin courtship activities during late January warm spells. Check and repair feeder hardware that may have deteriorated during winter storms. Interior regions. Focus on planning and preparation activities, including seed ordering, feeder maintenance, and garden design refinements based on the previous year's observations. Research new plant varieties that might enhance habitat while planning installation schedules for spring planting. Northern regions. Engage in education and planning activities while monitoring weather patterns that may influence spring arrival timing. Prepare equipment and materials for rapid deployment when migration begins, while continuing to learn about hummingbird ecology and conservation. Garden and feeder management. January garden activities focus on preparation rather than active management, with emphasis on planning improvements and ordering materials that will be needed during the active season. Review the previous year's garden performance, while identifying areas where additional nectar sources or habitat improvements could benefit returning birds. Feeder maintenance during January involves thorough cleaning and inspection of equipment that will be deployed during migration season. Replace worn parts, check for cracks or damage that might have developed during storage, and ensure that adequate supplies of cleaning materials and nectar ingredients are available for the busy season ahead. Winter pruning of flowering shrubs and trees should consider hummingbird requirements while maintaining plant health and appearance. Prune early blooming species after flowering to avoid removing buds that will provide crucial early season nectar sources for returning migrants. February. Stirrings of spring. What to expect. February marks the beginning of serious migration preparation in wintering areas as hummingbirds begin the hyperphagia that will build fat reserves necessary for their northward journeys. The first hints of spring migration may appear along the Gulf Coast during late February, as early male ruby-throated hummingbirds begin their return to breeding territories. Weather patterns during February often determine the timing and success of early migration attempts, with warm fronts potentially triggering movement while late winter storms may cause delays or mortality among birds that begin migration during unsettled conditions. Understanding local weather patterns helps predict when to expect first arrivals, while preparing for the possibility of early birds that may require emergency support during cold snaps. Photoperiod changes during February trigger hormonal responses in both wintering and resident birds that begin preparation for breeding activities. These changes affect territorial behavior, courtship activities, and feeding patterns in ways that may become apparent to careful observers even before obvious migration begins. The Gulf of Mexico crossing begins for some ruby-throated hummingbirds during favorable weather windows in late February, with males typically leading the northward movement by several days or weeks. These early migrants face significant risks from weather systems that can develop rapidly over the Gulf, while offering rewards of prime territory establishment for those that successfully complete the journey. Regional activities and preparations. Gulf Coast regions deploy clean feeders by mid-February to provide emergency resources for early arrivals while monitoring weather systems that may influence migration timing. Prepare emergency heating systems for feeders in case cold snaps threaten early arrivals. Southwestern deserts increase feeder maintenance frequency as resident populations begin breeding activities while preparing for arrival of migratory species that typically reach these areas in early March. Monitor early blooming desert plants that provide crucial nectar sources during late winter. Pacific Coast, support increasingly active resident populations while preparing for influx of migrants that typically begin arriving in March. Anna's hummingbirds may begin intense territorial and courtship activities during favorable February weather. Interior regions begin active preparation for migration season, including feeder deployment, garden preparation, and plant installation activities. Monitor long-range weather forecasts that may indicate early or late spring conditions affecting migration timing. Northern regions continue preparation activities while monitoring migration tracking websites and citizen science reports that indicate the progress of northward movement. Prepare for potential early arrivals during unusually warm February conditions. Garden and feeder management. Garden preparation accelerates during February as early blooming plants may begin showing activity that will provide crucial resources for early arrivals. Check early flowering shrubs and trees for bud development while protecting them from late winter weather that might damage emerging flowers. Feeder deployment should begin by mid-February in southern regions where early arrivals are possible, with clean feeders filled with fresh nectar positioned in sheltered locations that provide protection from late winter weather. Initial feeder placement should prioritize wind protection and easy visibility for arriving birds. Soil preparation in frost-free areas allows early planting of annual flowers that will provide summer nectar sources, though timing must balance early establishment against frost risk. In colder areas, indoor seed starting can begin for species that require long growing seasons to reach blooming size. March, the Great Return, begins. What to expect. March represents the beginning of serious migration activity across most of North America, as male hummingbirds lead the northward movement from wintering areas. The intensity and timing of migration varies significantly, with latitude and regional weather patterns, but most areas south of the Canadian border can expect at least the possibility of early arrivals during favorable March conditions. The Gulf Coast experiences peak early migration during March as ruby-throated hummingbirds complete their trans-Gulf crossing and spread inland toward breeding territories. These early arrivals face challenging conditions as natural nectar sources remain limited, while spring weather can still produce severe storms and late freezes that threaten survival. Western migration corridors become active during March as various species begin their northward journeys through different elevation zones and habitat types. The timing of western migration often correlates closely with elevation snowmelt and flower emergence patterns that provide stepping stone resources for traveling birds. Territorial establishment begins immediately upon arrival as males claim the best available areas while engaging in aggressive displays designed to exclude competitors. The intensity of territorial behavior during March often provides the best opportunities for close observation as birds focus on establishing dominance rather than avoiding human observers. Weather dependency during March migration creates significant year-to-year variation in arrival timing and success rates. Cold fronts can delay migration or cause mortality among early arrivals, while unusual warmth may trigger movements that outpace flower development and create temporary food shortages. Regional activities and preparations. Gulf Coast regions maintain multiple clean feeders with fresh nectar. As primary arrival areas experience heavy use by migrants building energy reserves for continued northward movement. Monitor weather systems that may concentrate large numbers of birds in coastal areas during storm delays. Southwestern deserts. Peak arrival period for many species requires maximum feeder capacity and maintenance attention, while desert wildflowers begin providing natural nectar sources. Support both migrants and increasingly active resident populations. Pacific Coast. Significant migration activity begins as various species move through coastal and inland corridors, while resident populations reach peak territorial intensity. Multiple feeder stations help accommodate increased bird numbers without creating excessive competition. Interior regions. Prepare for imminent arrivals while monitoring migration tracking reports that indicate northward progress. Deploy feeders during favorable weather periods while maintaining readiness for emergency support during late winter storms. Northern regions. Continue preparation activities while watching for unusually early arrivals that may occur during warm March weather. Have emergency support systems ready for early birds that may be caught by late season storms. Garden and feeder management. Feeder management during March requires increased attention to cleanliness and nectar freshness, as arriving birds may concentrate at limited artificial food sources. Daily monitoring becomes important as usage can increase rapidly when migrant waves arrive at feeders that may have seen little activity through winter. Garden preparation focuses on protecting emerging flowers that will provide crucial early nectar sources, while preparing planting areas for spring installation of annual and perennial species. Remove winter protection from early blooming plants while monitoring them for frost damage that might require corrective pruning. Emergency protocols should be established for supporting birds during late winter storms that may trap early arrivals in areas where natural food sources remain unavailable. Heated feeders or frequent nectar replacement may be necessary to maintain liquid food sources during freezing conditions. April. Spring. Acceleration. What to expect? April brings the peak of spring migration across most temperate regions, as the initial wave of early male arrivals is joined by females and younger birds, following more conservative timing strategies. The combination of increasing day length, warming temperatures, and emerging flowers creates optimal conditions for both migration and territorial establishment. Breeding activities begin in earnest during April, as established males attempt to attract females to their territories through elaborate courtship displays and vigorous territorial defense. The intensity of these activities provides excellent observation opportunities, while natural nectar sources begin supplementing artificial feeders with native flower resources. Weather remains a critical factor during April migration, as late-season storms can still cause significant mortality among migrants while delaying breeding activities and territory establishment. However, the increasing diversity of flowering plants provides more resilience against temporary weather setbacks than exists during earlier migration periods. Population dynamics become more complex during April as territorial boundaries solidify, while late arrivals attempt to establish territories in areas already claimed by earlier migrants. These competitive interactions often create the most intense behavioral displays of the entire year, while determining breeding success for individual birds. Regional variation in April activities reflects significant climatic differences across North America, with southern areas experiencing peak breeding activities, while northern regions may still be receiving initial arrivals from migration. Understanding local timing helps optimize support efforts for the specific activities occurring in each area. Regional activities and preparations. Gulf Coast regions. Peak breeding season requires maximum habitat quality and minimal disturbance as territorial birds establish nests and begin courtship activities. Maintain feeders while emphasizing natural flower resources that support both breeding birds and continuing migrants. Southwestern deserts. Intense breeding activity coincides with peak wildflower blooms that provide optimal natural food sources, supplement natural resources with well-maintained feeders, while avoiding disturbance of nesting areas. Pacific Coast. Peak territorial and breeding activities require careful feeder management to prevent excessive competition while providing adequate resources for establishing pairs. Monitor for nest building activities that indicate successful territory establishment. Interior regions. Major arrival period brings peak feeder usage and the need for maximum maintenance attention. Establish multiple feeding stations to reduce competition while providing emergency support during late-season weather events. Northern regions. Initial arrivals begin territorial establishment, while later waves continue through May. Prepare maximum support systems while monitoring for the first signs of local breeding activities. Garden and feeder management. Feeder maintenance reaches peak importance during April as maximum bird numbers create heavy usage that can rapidly degrade nectar quality if not properly managed. Daily attention may be necessary during peak migration periods, while multiple feeder stations help distribute usage and reduce territorial conflicts. Garden management focuses on supporting emerging flowers while beginning installation of summer blooming species that will provide resources during breeding season. Plant selection should emphasize native species that support both nectar requirements and insect populations needed for breeding success. Disturbance minimization becomes critical during April as breeding activities begin, and nest construction may occur in areas that received casual human use during winter months. Modify maintenance schedules and access patterns to avoid disrupting territorial and nesting birds. May. Nesting and territory. Consolidation. What to expect? May represents peak breeding season across most of North America, as established pairs begin nest construction and egg laying, while late migrants complete their journeys to northern breeding areas. The combination of maximum bird numbers with intensive reproductive activities creates the year's most complex and rewarding observation opportunities. Nest construction activities become visible to careful observers as females gather construction materials and begin the intricate process of building the tiny structures that will support their reproductive efforts. Understanding nest placement preferences helps observers locate active nests while avoiding disturbances that might cause abandonment. Territorial boundaries solidify during May as the pressures of defending resources for breeding override the tolerance that may have existed during migration periods. The intensity of territorial defense often creates dramatic chase sequences and confrontations that provide excellent opportunities for behavioral observation and photography. Late spring weather events can still impact breeding success through nest destruction, chilling of eggs or young, or temporary reduction in food availability that forces birds to abandon reproductive attempts. Understanding these vulnerabilities helps observers provide appropriate support while avoiding interventions that might cause more harm than good. Natural food sources reach their peak diversity during May as spring flowers provide abundant nectar, while warming weather increases insect activity that supplies essential protein for breeding birds. The balance between natural and artificial food sources shifts decisively toward natural sources in well-managed habitats. Regional activities and preparations. Gulf Coast regions. Peak breeding season requires minimal disturbance while maintaining supplemental food sources that support the intensive energy demands of reproduction. Monitor for nest construction while avoiding activities that might disrupt breeding birds. Southwestern deserts. Breeding activities coincide with peak flower availability, as desert species take advantage of optimal conditions for reproduction. Reduce artificial feeding as natural sources become abundant, while maintaining emergency support capabilities. Pacific Coast. Intensive breeding activities require careful habitat management that provides adequate resources while minimizing human disturbance. Multiple generations may be attempted by some species during extended favorable conditions. Interior regions. Peak breeding season brings maximum territorial intensity and the beginning of nest construction activities. Provide optimal habitat conditions while establishing observation protocols that avoid disturbing sensitive breeding areas. Northern regions, late arrivals complete migration, while early arrivals begin breeding activities. Establish feeding and habitat support systems while preparing for the intensive breeding activities that will characterize summer months. Garden and feeder management. Habitat management during May emphasizes supporting breeding activities while providing the diverse resources needed for successful reproduction. Native plant communities that support both nectar sources and insect populations become particularly important as protein requirements increase during breeding season. Feeder management transitions from migration support to breeding support, with emphasis on consistent availability rather than maximum capacity. Clean, reliable feeders provide security for breeding birds, while natural sources should supply the majority of nutritional needs in well-designed habitats. Disturbance protocols become critical during May, as any human activities must be carefully planned to avoid disrupting nesting birds. Observation techniques should emphasize distance and patience, while maintenance activities should be minimized in areas where breeding activities are observed. June through August, the breeding season. Peak summer activities. The summer months represent the culmination of the hummingbird year, as breeding activities reach their peak intensity, while the first signs of fall migration preparation begin appearing among early departing individuals. June brings peak nesting activity as females incubate eggs and raise young, while males continue territorial defense and may attempt to attract additional mates. Nest monitoring during summer requires extreme care to avoid disturbance that could cause abandonment or predation of eggs and young. Successful observation techniques emphasize distance and patience while using optical equipment to observe activities without approaching nests closely enough to alter normal behavior patterns. The intensive protein requirements of breeding females and growing young create peak demand for insect prey that often requires mothers to travel considerable distances from nest sites in search of adequate hunting opportunities. Understanding this behavior helps explain apparent abandonment of prime nectar sources, as birds prioritize protein over carbohydrate resources. Weather impacts during summer can devastate breeding success through nest destruction during storms, heat stress during extreme temperature events, or drought conditions that reduce both flower production and insect availability. Habitat management that provides diverse microclimates helps birds cope with challenging weather conditions. July typically brings the first indications of fall migration preparation as adult males complete breeding activities and begin the physiological changes that will support southward migration. These early departures often go unnoticed as territorial intensity decreases, while remaining birds may actually become more visible as territorial pressure relaxes. August marks the beginning of serious fall migration preparation as adult birds complete molt cycles and begin intensive feeding that will build fat reserves for southward journeys. Young birds fledged earlier in the season begin developing migration readiness, while late broods may still be completing development in nests. Regional summer patterns. Gulf Coast regions, multiple broods may be attempted during extended favorable conditions, while extreme heat requires habitat that provides adequate shade and water sources. Late summer preparation for fall migration begins as early as July for some individuals. Southwestern deserts. Breeding success depends heavily on adequate water sources and shade, as extreme heat can limit activity to early morning and late evening periods. Monsoon patterns may trigger secondary breeding attempts when conditions improve. Pacific Coast. Extended breeding seasons may support multiple broods, while mild summer conditions allow continued territorial activity throughout the season. Natural food source management becomes critical as flower succession supports breeding through summer months. Interior regions. Peak breeding activity occurs during optimal summer conditions, while late summer begins showing signs of migration preparation as day length decreases and flower diversity begins declining. Northern regions. Compressed breeding seasons require rapid progression through all reproductive activities, while birds must begin migration preparation earlier due to shorter favorable seasons and longer migration distances. Summer management strategies. Garden management during summer emphasizes maintaining flower succession that provides nectar sources throughout the extended breeding period while supporting insect populations through diverse native plant communities. Water source management becomes particularly critical during hot, dry periods when natural sources may become scarce. Feeder management during summer requires increased attention to cleanliness, as hot weather accelerates nectar fermentation, while heavy usage can rapidly deplete feeders during peak activity periods. Shade provision for feeders helps maintain nectar quality while protecting feeding birds from heat stress. Maintenance schedules during summer must balance habitat needs with disturbance minimization as breeding activities continue throughout the season. Essential maintenance should be scheduled for early morning or late evening hours when bird activity is naturally reduced. September through November, the Great Departure. Fall. Migration patterns. September initiates the most extended and complex period of hummingbird activity, as fall migration unfolds over several months, with different age classes and species departing according to distinct schedules. Adult males typically lead the southward movement as early as late July and August, followed by females and finally by young birds making their first migration attempts. The extended timing of fall migration reflects the different pressures operating during southward movement compared to spring migration. While spring migrants face urgent breeding deadlines that compress migration into brief periods, fall migrants can afford more leisurely travel schedules that allow opportunistic feeding and gradual conditioning for long journeys. Peak fall migration typically occurs during September and early October, as the majority of North American hummingbird populations begin their journeys toward tropical wintering areas. This period often provides the most spectacular viewing opportunities as multiple species and age classes concentrate at productive feeding sites while building energy reserves for continued travel. October brings continued migration activity, while northern regions may experience the first freezes that eliminate natural nectar sources and trigger final departure preparations among lingering birds. The timing of first frost often determines the end of hummingbird activity in northern regions, while southern areas may continue hosting migrants well into November. November represents the end of migration for most North American regions as the last stragglers complete their journeys toward wintering areas. However, some southern regions may continue hosting late migrants, while resident populations in mild climates begin adjusting to winter conditions. Regional fall activities. Gulf Coast regions. Extended fall migration period requires continued feeder maintenance through November as late migrants continue passing through, while some individuals may attempt overwintering during mild years. Southwestern deserts. Fall migration activity varies among species, with some residents remaining year-round, while migrants depart according to species-specific schedules. Late-blooming desert plants provide crucial resources for departing birds. Pacific Coast, resident populations transition to winter behaviors, while migrants depart according to varied schedules that may extend into November. Some individuals may attempt overwintering during particularly mild years. Interior regions. Peak fall migration during September and October requires maximum feeder support, while natural food sources begin declining. Last departure typically occurs with first hard freezes that eliminate remaining flower resources. Northern regions. Early and intensive fall migration reflects short seasons and long migration distances. Peak activity occurs during August and September, with departure typically complete by early October. Fall management protocols. Fall feeder management requires extended commitment to provide reliable resources for migrants, building energy reserves for continued travel. The often quoted advice to remove feeders to encourage migration has been thoroughly debunked by research showing that birds migrate based on internal biological clocks rather than food availability. Garden management during fall emphasizes late-blooming species that provide crucial resources during peak migration periods. Plants that flower into October and November can make significant differences in migration success while requiring minimal additional care beyond normal seasonal maintenance. Weather monitoring becomes particularly important during fall migration, as early freezes can strand unprepared birds, while severe weather systems can cause mortality among migrants caught in unfavorable conditions. Emergency protocols for supporting birds during weather emergencies can save lives during critical periods. December. Planning and reflection. End of season activities. December marks the conclusion of hummingbird activity across most of North America, as the last migrants complete their journeys toward tropical wintering areas, while northern regions settle into the quiet period that will last until spring migration resumes. This period provides opportunities for reflection on the year's successes and challenges, while beginning planning for improvements in the coming year. Equipment maintenance during December includes thorough cleaning and inspection of feeders, evaluation of garden performance, and planning for habitat improvements that will benefit returning birds. This period allows unhurried assessment of what worked well and what might be improved for better results in future seasons. Record keeping and data analysis help identify patterns in bird activity, timing variations, and habitat preferences that can guide future management decisions. Comparing current year observations with historical data helps reveal long-term trends while contributing to broader understanding of local hummingbird populations. Educational activities during December provide opportunities for sharing experiences and learning from other enthusiasts, while planning participation in citizen science programs that contribute to hummingbird research and conservation. Winter lecture series and planning meetings often occur during this quiet period. Winter resident support in mild climates requires continued attention to feeder maintenance and winter blooming plant care that supports the small populations of hummingbirds that attempt overwintering in areas where they might not historically have remained year-round. Annual planning and improvement. Habitat assessment during December allows evaluation of garden performance and identification of improvements that could enhance hummingbird support in coming years. This planning period provides time for research, ordering materials, and coordinating projects that will be implemented during the active season. Equipment replacement and upgrading can be planned during December when there is time for research and comparison shopping without the pressure of immediate need. Quality equipment purchased during off-season sales often provides better value while ensuring readiness for spring activities. Knowledge improvement through reading, attending presentations, and connecting with other enthusiasts helps build skills and understanding that will enhance success in supporting hummingbirds. The winter period provides ideal timing for education activities that might be difficult to pursue during busy migration and breeding seasons. Conservation planning allows evaluation of opportunities for habitat improvement, community involvement, and support for broader conservation initiatives that protect hummingbird populations and their habitats. Individual actions planned during winter can be implemented throughout the coming year for maximum effectiveness. The hummingbird year represents a continuous cycle of activities and opportunities that reward those who learn to anticipate and respond to the changing needs of these remarkable birds. Understanding the timing and requirements of each season allows bird enthusiasts to provide optimal support while enjoying the unique pleasures that each period offers. Whether tracking the excitement of spring migration, supporting the intensive activities of breeding season, or preparing for the challenges of fall departure, each month brings distinct rewards for those who commit to following the complete hummingbird calendar. The investment in year-round attention pays dividends in deeper understanding, more successful bird support, and the ongoing satisfaction of participating meaningfully in the lives of some of nature's most extraordinary creatures. If you liked what you heard today, consider purchasing other books by Bradley Barkhurst, including Underlying Love, a Worthington, Ohio mystery. It's 1941 in the quaint village of Worthington, Ohio. Life is changing at the end of the Great Depression. Elizabeth Russo, 23, teaches elementary school, but feels uncertain about her future. Her Sicilian immigrant father ran the Red and White, a popular village general store. 5 years prior, Elizabeth's high school sweetheart, Samuel, left the village abruptly, leaving her with unanswered questions. Now engaged to George, the Red and White's accountant, Elizabeth still can't forget Samuel. When her father tragically passes away and her mother goes to Cincinnati to help her ailing Aunt Gracie, Elizabeth is forced to be alone. Then one night, Elizabeth receives a phone call from her mother, asking her to come to Cincinnati to see her ailing aunt. Before leaving, and without notice, Samuel, Elizabeth's high school sweetheart, unexpectedly shows up in the village. Upon Elizabeth's return from Cincinnati, she hears a scream and sees a figure fleeing. The village banker, Mr. Collins, is found murdered, with suspicion falling on a local hobo. Elizabeth and her quirky neighbor, Betty Wimsfeld, investigate the murder. As they uncover village secrets, Elizabeth struggles with her feelings for George and Samuel. Will Elizabeth solve the murder mystery? Will she choose her stable engagement or risk rekindling an old flame? Find out in Underlying Love, a Worthington, Ohio mystery, available through major book retailers and underlyinglove.com. Stay tuned for the next episode of Little Winged Wonders, Book 2, Garden Allies, The Tiny Heroes in Your Backyard.